Thanks a lot, Klaus. Jacques and I put together the slides here in the back. We had a bit of a discussion about who was most tired, and the end, my performance as moderator yesterday really didn't use very much energy, so I clearly was more energized than Jacques, who's been running the show here with his colleagues behind the scenes. So he suggested that I try to run you through the conclusions, and then, of course, for you to comment. The big challenge in sitting back there trying to write was, first of all, to follow the discussion here towards the end, because the discussion evolves over 2 days, and it's actually what is said in the very end where people do start formulating conclusions, so we tried to capture what was being discussed. The other challenge in writing conclusions is always, you can always write, we all got together, we had a good chat, we thought everything went well, and we have lots of recommendations. Nobody's going to disagree with that. But we actually tried to come up with something that really says something, which of course means maybe not everybody agreed. But I hope that we have found the things that everybody does agree on and actually formulated in a way that we can take it home and do something about it. So here goes. What did we see? Well, I think the whole discussion has shown, and I know Matti several times yesterday and Jacques in the early morning wrap-up did mention it and did challenge whether there was disagreement, and there didn't seem to be, that the application for authorization system works. So AFA works. It's not authorization as a whole. We have still issues and discussions which came up in the margins and in the discussions here regarding authorization, which still need to be resolved, but overall the application part and the processing up to Commission decision, it does work. There are parts where one would even dare to say, but we ended up removing that word, that it works well. But there are also parts where clearly there are problems and issues which we need to address. So in summary, this part of the system, it does work. It does provide pressure on industry to substitute towards safer substances. I think that's something that has been shown by the speakers. It came through many of the interventions. And I also think, for me, interesting conclusion hearing from several speakers and several interventions that this additional burden, it does lead to further improvement of risk management measures, and in some cases in rather surprising situations, which we heard from some of the applicants. The process is, this is not trying to claim that it always has been, but at least now it is transparent and predictable. Companies that can demonstrate a well-documented business case for continued use of manufacture or continued use of a substance, they will get an authorization. I think that we've seen, even though the Commission, we're at 2, we still have a few more decisions to go, but the discussions we're having in Brussels are not about shall we or shall we not grant the authorization. It's our growing pains that now the applicants have way behind their backs, that the committees have gotten through. It's now our turn to have the growing pains of figuring out exactly how we're going to formulate a Commission decision on this, and that's why we're at the top of or at the steep part of the learning curve, but eventually we'll also get into the flow as the applicants are and as ICA committees already are. There are, of course, a number of buts, and I think that was where we had quite a lot of discussion. So there's clearly room for improvement. We had some examples, and also the final discussion kept showing that costs are still high. And for some cases, the process is too burdensome, and one, depending on who one is and what's perspective, but at least one can safely conclude that there are even cases that are possibly even disproportionate in terms of what companies at the moment are doing for the application and the whole support of the process all the way through. Nevertheless, even though experience is still limited, dossier drafting may be less complicated than suggested. I think that was what came out very clearly from our two chairs, who were saying there's sometimes a lot done which is not necessarily the right thing done. And I think that message, exactly like that, is very important, because that means that there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel, and we need to get there. The crux is really to get that balance right. I also think, and I forget exactly who it was, but that's because I'm getting old and my memory is no more than 3 milliseconds, nanoseconds, because we're working on nano. But somebody yesterday complimented ICA in no unclear terms, and when I was outside and talking to other people from industry, I think those compliments were echoed. So I think it's very important to emphasize that I think that in the authorization process, ICA Secretariat and the committees and the chairpersons have been doing a lot to ensure that applicants work well, the Secretariat, that the committees work well, that ICA, in its support to the Commission, that we can make our decisions well, and that the whole process runs efficiently. Generally, and here's a lot of buzzwords, the support, the guidance, the clarification notes, the sharing of good practice, etc., is well appreciated. I'll get to follow-up, which of course elaborates and says we have to work more on this. I think some of a lot of the intervention showed that ICA has helped, and by the ICA help, the applicants could prepare dossiers which were more targeted, more ended up being able to demonstrate the case more efficiently and could have an easier, or rather quicker, processing through the committees. Having the DNLs and the dose response function, this is careful wording, is almost a prerequisite. I think it was echoed everywhere that this is a grand approach, grand initiative from the Secretariat, and a grand initiative from the RAC to develop these in order to ease the whole processing, not only for the applications, but also through the committees. It increases legal certainty, it increases predictability, and it, I think the whole issue of go and do some monitoring, we've told you what level you need, really creates a lot of certainty on the risk assessment part of your application. There's a need for more specific advice on what a fit-for-purpose dossier really looks like, and I think a lot of the discussions here are showing that some mechanism of finding parts of existing dossiers and saying this is what we in the SEAC really liked, or this is what we in the RAC really liked, and possibly even this is what we in the Commission really liked in an opinion from the RAC and the SEAC. As good examples of bits and pieces of the dossiers could be a really good next step. And I think that was quite appreciated from a lot of people. But we also heard from the RAC and the SEAC that they are really prepared and ready to provide further help. And I think that this is at least one of the topics that they could work on. Sorry, there was one point that I forgot to say. On the second bullet, where we're talking about sharing of good practice, and also regarding the fit for purpose of dossiers. I think the German experience between BAUA and BCI on I can never pronounce it right, but this solvent used for pharmaceuticals, starting with an A, is a really, really good example of how an authority with industry sits down, rolls up their sleeves and says, how can we do this in the best way, fit for purpose, answering the right questions, and come up with a common approach? And I think that type of collaboration discussion on a real case is extremely valuable, and I think has also helped the workshop get to this more comfortable feeling, at least for me, that the system is working than I had when I came in early yesterday morning. There are concerns, clearly. I think we thought that the two most general concerns aired by the most people was are we getting the balance between upstream broad application and the downstream use conditions right? Are the upstream applicants addressing the issue of transferring to alternatives for the downstream users correctly? I think that was one issue which popped up over and over, that clearly from an administrative perspective, a broad application is great because you only got one, but still that one has to be as good as if everybody applied alone. And getting that balance right is complex, and we need to further investigate that. Is the ultimate aim of progressively replacing SVHCs with safer alternatives still sufficiently addressed? That's one of the questions which I also think kept coming up in the individual cases. And we thought an important point to put into the conclusions. Way forward, well, we need to take account of the appreciations, advice, and recommendations provided here. And here, I think that's always so wonderful with the Commission. We can always say that'll be ICA that takes care of all of that. But there were also a few recommendations, I think, in terms of the Commission. I think we, as ICA and Commission, will take this on board, divide up the specific recommendations and ideas we've gotten here and see what are we going to tackle and communicate back, probably via Caracal and the ICA committees, what we're going to do, when and where. Clearly, we have to continuously improve. It should actually be no need to put it on the slide, but I think we thought it's good to reiterate that reevaluation of everything we do all the time in order to find out where can we do better is a necessity, and this is both in terms of what ICA does, what member states do, what the Commission does. We need to continue trying to simplify the formats in order to target what is important and what is maybe less important. We have to implement options for generally streamlining the whole process. Now here comes this isn't vision, this is my hobby, to put stupid names on things. So basically getting authorization right, but also implement where justified and as soon as possible solutions for special cases, so authorization light. Now those, you don't need to agree on those labels, it's just putting it in. And finally, continue to ask feedback from all of you so that we are sure that we can all learn from the lessons that you have had or we have had and communicate them. Thanks.